It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly, so let's realign. Just listen and feel your mind.
Hey guys, how's it going? And welcome to the MSD on 117.8. It's Tuesday, November 25th, and we're so happy for you joining us once again on this beloved Tuesday. Um, this is so crazy. I think I say this a lot whenever I'm recording, and I guess this just goes to show you how amazing Providence life is and just how eventful and exciting it is, right? So, right now I'm actually recording at the airport. Um, and I think this is the first time that I've done this. So hopefully there's no like background noise for you guys, because for me there's like music playing and stuff in the background. I tried to find a place that was relatively quiet, but I think this is the best you can do. I'm actually kind of surprised how busy it is. It's like 6 a.m. in the morning for me on Monday, but the airport's pretty busy. And I think it may be because it's the week of Thanksgiving here in the US, right? Which is one of our biggest holidays, I would say. And I know like for Canada, I was speaking to some Canadian members before. They also have a Thanksgiving, right, which is in October. And so for us, like I would say that we're busy getting ready, and for everyone across the world, right? Like people have different times like for Thanksgiving, and so I think the overall kind of vibe and atmosphere during those like celebrations of Thanksgiving are all the same. And I kind of hope that, no matter like what culture, what place people are in, that like these kind of holidays that kind of come back in fashion. Right? It's not to say that Thanksgiving ever like went out of fashion, but people treat these things very differently, right? Like even with Christmas, like people talk about how it's become very like a market thing, right? Like it's like just there's so much consumerism that goes along with Christmas, and Thanksgiving a little bit less so. I think Thanksgiving like by and large is like way less popular than Christmas, and there's no like gift giving, and there's no like merriment and stuff like that. So it's kind of hard to like make it like consumer based. But even then, right? Like Black Friday is the day after Thanksgiving. So I guess in a way it's had its fair share of that as well. But anyways, yeah, like that's kind of where I am right now, and yeah, it's been crazy, right? Because I went back home for a wedding on like Wednesday night, so I got in town back at home at midnight on Wednesday, and then today on Sunday I left like at like 6 p.m. and I've been like, I think I booked these flights a long time ago, so I can't remember like I didn't remember like what the return flight was like, but I had bought like a flight with two layovers, and I think it's been a long time since I've done that, right? Like, I think on a good day I'm okay with a layover, right? As long as it's not like crazy in some like terrible airport in a terrible place, but I didn't think that I booked a flight with two with two of these. All right, so I think total travel time is probably over like 12, 13 hours, like with the waiting in between. And this, if I had a direct flight, it probably would have been like 6 hours, right, max. So it's kind of crazy. But I'm still thankful because there were a lot of things that I didn't plan, but God just kept blessing like all the way through, right? Like at each airport that I went to, I've been able to access an airport lounge. And even right now, like it was like 5 a.m. when I got in to this airport, so I wasn't expecting there to be a lounge that was open or anything. But I walked in, and it was available, and so it not only did it give me a place to record, but it gave me a place to listen to the morning message, and to get some breakfast. And this happened like all throughout the last few flights that I've had. But yes, with everyone like all across the world, I hope you had an amazing weekend and a great start to your week. For those listening at home, that you're probably going through your Tuesday after having gone through your Monday already, right? And so, um, yeah, like how was everyone's weekend, right? Like this week's message was amazing, right? And it was so interesting for me because it's been a while since I've been home. And like being on the East Coast, a lot of the times I join like New York service or like the service with like the church here in Atlanta. And so it's been a while since I had joined service with like the West Coast and with LA. And yeah, like every time you do that, right, it just kind of gives you a different sense of like, oh, like how people do things, right? And so I hope that this is something that you guys can experience, right? And like, I don't know, like for every person listening at home, like whether this is something that you think about, but like, would it's not to say that we're gonna compare services, but when you watch one service, you start to think about, oh, what does this service do well that the other service, could improve on? And what is something that this service can improve on that another, service does well? Right? So those kind of questions can come up, and right, I'm sure everyone like sees various different things, right? And so sometimes I wonder, like, they always like ask for those like feedback surveys, right? And if you've only been observing like your church's services for like a long time, then maybe it'd be hard to give feedback. Like maybe it's hard to see like what you don't know, right? Like you don't know what you don't know, right? But if you go out and you get to experience these different services and see how a different preacher preaches or see a different text setup, then it kind of gives you a better frame of reference for like, oh, like what is it that our church can improve on. And I think I don't know how you guys view like feedback, right? Because sometimes feedback may seem kind of sensitive, like, oh, like like people are criticizing even though they're not the ones like helping and running and doing things and stuff like that. And that can happen, and that's not like a Providence thing. That's just like a worldwide thing, right? Like even like right now for school, I have to write feedback stuff for like my professors and stuff like that. And some professors will take it well, right? They'll be like, "Oh, okay, like this is something that I need to improve on." And then other people will get like really offended that, that you give like feedback if it's like negative. And so like there's a right way to give feedback and a right way to receive feedback too, right? And so I really do hope that all of us look at it, whether it's for us, right, or for our church, or for like another subset of Providence, right? Whether it's like your department or your mission, like within whatever sphere of like activity that you're part of, that we do think about how we can improve things, right? And that's like really at the crux of this week's message too, about polishing our hearts, right? And it's really really interesting because something was talking about how there's like over like 100 places that tell us how and why to polish our hearts, right, in these various different ways. And I think it is so clear because a lot of the times this is the question that we're asking, right? When it says like, oh, you have to do this, like, oh, you have to take action on the word, like, and then you think about, okay, what does that mean? Right, you try to boil it down. And this week's message, it was clear because something gave a lot of the ways that we can polish our hearts and make ourselves, but then he just told us that in the Bible there are hundreds of these references. And so that's something that we can absolutely go look at, right? And so this was so crucial for me, right? Like while I was in San Francisco, I met with a newcomer, and I can't go into the details of what we talked about, but in the process, I was sharing with him that a while ago when I started reading like the Bible cover to cover, there's so many references and so many topics that you want to like keep track of, right? When it talks about like, yeah, like the heart, right? Like how many times in the Bible does the heart come up, right? In various different contexts, right? And like if you now there's like Bible search engines, right? Like Bible websites that, if you look up a keyword, it'll like tell you all the scriptures, right? Or like at least that they have topically been able to assign to those things, right? So if you look up heart, it'll tell you all the direct times it says heart and all of the topical strings that talk about the heart too. And so in the same way, yeah, like so I was showing the newcomer, yeah, like I started doing this because I wanted to track certain things. I think a couple of things I was really curious about in the beginning was about the various the covenants that God made with human beings, right? Because when we talk about the Old Testament and the New Testament, that word testament, right? It's talking about like serving as a record, right? As a witness between two parties, right? Between us and God, right? And of this promise and this covenant that we have, right? That's what it is, right? Testament means witness, and covenant means this promise. And so, like like I forgot why I started thinking about that, but you start to be curious, like when did God first make this promise, right? Because we know that through Jesus and through the New Testament, he fulfilled the promise at a higher level, right? He made this new covenant. And then in the complete testament, he makes and he fulfills the final promise and an even higher level promise. And so yeah, like I started tracing back in the Old Testament when he first says that. And quiz question for those at home, right? When was the first time that the word covenant comes up? Right, can you guys take a guess? I'll give you guys a couple seconds. Right? I'll give you a hint. Like with whom did he make the first covenant with? Right? It was with Noah. Right? So when you look through the story of Noah, like after the judgment of the flood, God says that He will make a covenant with Noah. So Noah was the first person, and then it comes up again in Abraham, and then it comes up again like in all of the patriarchs, yeah, and then it just like goes on like throughout like the Bible. And so like yeah, like it was just really fascinating. So I started like making my own Google Doc of these different topical things, and like the way that it came up in the message, and that it caught my attention for that, and for like all the other things, right? Like this week the message was talking about the heart, and I was just talking about one thing that it's like all over the Bible with covenant. And I remember like a while ago when the message came out about dreams, right? Like it was like telling us like like how to understand and interpret our dreams. Like and I was joining like a word review with the New York church, and we were sharing like whether we had dreams in the past that were deeply spiritual or anything like that. And I remembered a dream from when I was like 7 years old, where like Jesus appeared and he said, you are my hands. And this is before I had ever heard like that kind of reference before, like referencing a part of the body, like being a part of the body and like a very specific part of the body, right? So after this word study, it reminded me of that dream. And so I went on that, on one of the Bible search engines, right? Probably on BibleGateway.com, right? Which I'm sure a lot of people have access before. And I looked up like the word hands, right? I worked up both the singular and the plural. So I looked up hand, and I looked up hands, right? And it was really incredible. I think when I looked up, I don't know which one it was, but when I looked one of them up, it gave back 117, right? Search results for the word hand or hands, right? So it was like 117, and so I was like, wow, okay. Well, I mean, one, it would take me forever to go through all of that, but like it goes to show that wow, like oh wow, like we should look at the Bible in the way that something has instructed this week. With the topic of the heart and of polishing these things and about like all of the different facets that encompasses like the week's message said, like whether it's like it even talked about being bold and brave, right, in context to the heart, right? Like it talked about Joshua verse on 1 verse 9, chapter 1 verse 9, right, about being bold and courageous. And you may not necessarily like that wasn't like the the most direct stretch from like the heart to this characteristic, but it just makes sense, right? Like even when we think about being brave and being courageous, the place where we think of that is like in the heart, right? Like oftentimes like when we think about courage, it's not necessarily in the brain, right? Or in the mind, even though that's probably a better place that you would describe it, right? But you think about it in terms of your heart, right? Being brave in your heart, right? And so, like, there's all of these different things. And when we think about polishing your heart, of course, you have to be brave and be courageous. Of course, that's the way you have to develop yourself. Of course, you have to be pure and clean and, not look to like people with lustful eyes and those kinds of things. Of course, you have to, like, what else was in the message, right? Like all of these various different qualities of the heart to polish it, right? And like, so this is going to the bigger question, right? Like if the message just came out and it said polish your heart, right? And like, and he didn't give us the instruction about how to do that, about where to find that in the Bible, about the fact that it's all over the Bible, then we will never look in the Bible in this way, right? Looking at the hundreds of different ways that you can possibly do this. And the reason why I bring this up is like because for each of us, like we have interests in this, right? We have things that we want to do, right? We have different things that we want to accomplish, like in our lives, in our missions, even currently. And the place to find that is in the Word and in the Bible specifically, right? Like I don't know, I don't know like how everyone's Bible reading has been of late, but this is like something to motivate us and to make us look once again to the Bible, like more specifically. And I think like this has a carryover into like literally anything, right? Like whether like you have an interest, like even in something like making YouTube videos, right? Or of like working in your job or like evangelizing, these kinds of things, right? There are hundreds of references to each of those things, right? Like even in the Bible, right? Like like I shared with the dream thing, there were 117 references to hands, right? And that's like in terms of topics, that's more of like a I don't know how else to describe it. Like the hand is a noun, right? It's a noun. It's an object, right? It's not like a concept. It's not like something like training our heart, right? It's not like a broader topic, a theme, right? But in terms of your theme, even in terms of something like, let's say like you want to make a YouTube video or a YouTube channel, and you want to figure out how to do that in a way that will be successful, right? Then there's so many different ways to approach that. Like you can think about like how many different ways to create content in this way. And then you can also think about like um how to what's a good way to describe this, like how to um, define success, right? Like what are the metrics that we use for success? And like as you go forward, like if we want to gauge whether we're doing well or not, whether we're producing quality content or not, like you can look through what the Bible talks about in terms of success, right? And like it's fascinating too, because if we look to this week's message about the hundreds of different topics, each of the individual like things that come up, whether it's about courage, whether it's about cleanliness, whether it's about perfection or devotion, in terms of the heart, each of that could be its own thing, right? Each of that is its own sermon and message, and like that's pretty much what each portion of the Bible could be, right? Like each portion could literally be its own message. But something gave us a message that like kind of covers all of these things this week, right? As one topic. And what another thing that does is it shows you how all of these things work together, right? When you combine things like the heart needing to be bold and courageous to the heart needing to be clean and pure, there's an interplay there that doesn't exist if you look at those things separately. So not only do you have these pieces individually, but you have them working together and making it a different combination and all together forming a much better picture, right, for all of these things. Anyways, I just thought that that was so fascinating. And so you may have a topic that is like very important to you that you've been thinking about and that you've been wondering about, right? This is the big key, right? Like that you've been wondering about, like, God, like, how do I do this, right? And I think people in Providence, like we are a history of action, right? But at the same time, because we want to do things perfectly according to God's will and His word, like sometimes, it can lead to inaction, right? Like we kind of sit around, we ask God, or like God, how do I do this, right? But not only do we have the word of this time period, but we have like the perfect word of the Bible. And being people of providence, we have been trained and taught how to read the Bible and understand it correctly. Like we have the man of mission who did all of the work of breaking all the seals in the Bible, of teaching us how to look at it not from our perspective, but from the perspective of God. And even before that, like when we learn the introductory stuff and the introductory concepts, like with parables and other things, we learn to look at it from the context of the people, like of the time that people that lived in the Bible, right? Not just to look at it from our perspective. And like as I've been meeting with more newcomers, like we see the value and the truth of that even more, right? Because people believe in crazy things, right? About not just the Bible, but just about life, right? They live in their thoughts, right? They live in according to their hearts, right? As this week's message said. So depending on how that's made, it really impacts how we live our life. And so yeah, I hope that this kind of helps you guys. I really believe that this is important for everyone, to really to be able to make it until the end, for Providence history and for each of us, right? We have exactly a month left of this year, all right, and at the time of recording, right, like exactly a month until Christmas. And so I hope that if you do have an interest, you do have something that you were thinking about, and maybe you can't even define exactly like what's been on your mind, right? Because a lot of times that happens, right? Like as we mentioned, right? You don't know what you don't know, right? So like you're like you may be struggling with something, or like you may be going through and experiencing something right now, and not exactly know what it is, right? Like like there's some days that you may even feel off and you're not exactly sure. Right, so in those times, we do have to pray to God and to check and to see what it is. At the same time, one of the things that comes to mind is like when you start to read the Bible too, the things will come up, right? Like I think like even for me, as I started like putting together that Google Doc of these like different references and things that I was looking for, like it started growing like crazy, right? Like the covenant and like the promises that God made to us, and the path of good and the path of evil, right? The curse and blessing, right? Like those kind of things was things I was interested in. But as I started doing that, you start to see scriptures that talk about the law, that talk about love, that talk about this and that. And so I started like piecing together this whole document of a bunch of other things too. And so for us to, right, like as we read through the message, as we read through the scriptures in the Bible, and as we go forward and take action, we start to see like the things that we weren't aware of, the things that we should be looking at more carefully, the things that we were interested in, and we see is like, okay, this is the thing that I was trying to answer, but I didn't know what it was at the time. And so whatever it is that each of you, each of us are going through, I hope that you're able to come to terms with it by taking action, by reading the Bible, by living according to the Bible, by living according to the Word. And most importantly, right? Like, of course, we may have our own individual topics that we're interested in, but in terms of polishing the heart of this week's message, that we can really do that. And like I think taking the as the last part for this segment, taking the being bold and courageous thing into factor. um uh yeah, I guess is the biggest thing, but taking being the bold and courageous thing, like like we said, that doesn't directly have the word like heart in that in that sentence, right? In that passage. But when we really think about it, that has everything to do with the heart. That has everything to do with polishing our hearts and making our hearts in that way, right? Because you may not be naturally bold and courageous, right? Who like is just born out of the womb and they are bold and courageous against everything, right? Like some people, their temperaments and their disposition may be more bold and courageous in a lot of ways, but a lot of times, being bold and courageous means like facing something that you don't know if you're capable of facing, right? So even if like a person's natural disposition is to be kind of like strong and overall bold and courageous compared to other people, it doesn't necessarily mean that subjectively within their own lives that they're bold and courageous all the time, right? That person may have things that they fear, and that person may have things that they worry about. And so for that person, just like with everyone else, they still have to make their hearts bold and courageous in that sense. But like with this message about polishing our hearts, like even as we read through the rest of the Bible, we can think about, okay, so what does it mean to polish the heart? How do these other things play in? How does the purpose of creation play in? How do parables play in? One of the other parts was talking about Galatians 5:23, right? Like talking about the various different fruits of the Holy Spirit, as we know. And we know all of those things in the core, like can, does tie into this thing of polishing our hearts, right? And like, I think level one for us would be to look through the scriptures that talk directly about the heart. But the higher level stuff is being able to, see how the rest of the message, how everything else ties in to the heart. Right. And yeah, like I'm excited. Like if you feel like for you guys, like throughout the week, there's like like a topic for you in the Bible or a topic from the messages as of late that connects to this thing about polishing the heart, and can help us to polish our heart in a specific way. Please share. Like I think that's so fascinating, right? And you can help. You can even help me with filling out my Google Doc. Like it's been a long time since I looked at it, and it only came up because I was meeting with that newcomer back at home. And so with that, I'll conclude this segment for Bible today. Today may be even shorter than it was last week, and I apologize for that, but I thank you guys too because I'm sure that you guys love hearing my voice. Just kidding. But for everyone's like tremendous support and for listening, as well as for everyone's feedback and comments and encouragement. But I hope that today's Bible today was interesting. I'm curious to know if there's like any thoughts that spring up for you as you listen to it, right? Is there a topic that fascinated you that like about the Bible that maybe doesn't necessarily fascinate someone else? Like the covenant thing was big for me. And I think it was because uh, there's probably a lot of different, like, I'm not going to point out one thing in my life that made that fascinating, but I remember in college, I took mm, it was a course about like I can't remember. I don't think it was a course about the Bible, but the Bible was a big part of it, right? Like, and then this is a college course, right? And I wasn't like in like theology like classes or anything like that. And so this is more like a political philosophy class. So I think it was something like religion and politics. It was me is my guess for what the topic was. And I really loved what the professor did because he knows what environment he's in, right? Because like a lot of these kids, they're pretty averse to religion. Um, at least at the place at the time and place that I was in. And so he does this so masterfully because like some of these kids they try to make these very low level attacks against Christianity and against like the against in the word and the Bible. And like he defended the Bible not by like directly criticizing their comments, but by providing analysis that was quite objective, and that he was able to make those assertions even without necessarily making it like very religious or faith based. And it was interesting because I think like he was ethnically Jewish, and he wasn't like sharing his faith or anything like that, but he was ethnically Jewish, but I think he was Christian, right? Because he was sharing like different parts of the Bible and such. And so one of the things that he mentioned was, and I think I mentioned this on 2G Talks a long time ago, But he was sharing how, like, in the Old Testament, right, the promise um, was about this, like, this physical homeland, right? The idea was that, like, if you look at the various tribes all across that area, uh, no one believed in one God, right? Everyone had idols, and they all lived in these like nomadic tribes, and the tribe of Israel was like one such tribe among them. But compared to everyone else, they had a monotheistic God. They had a singular God they served, and the relationship between them and their God was such that it was a promise between them and God that said, "As long as you follow and believe in me, you will always have this home, right? You will always have a country. You will always have this promised land, right?" And so that's like the promise of the Old Testament. And he was even sharing that when Jesus came, one of the things that, one of the reasons why the Jewish people rejected Jesus is because they wanted a king to come like David, right? They wanted a king that would come and that would save them physically from the Romans, right? Like from the political forces. But when Jesus came, he said, it doesn't matter who is above you physically, right? What kind of uh, earthly forces above you physically, because your kingdom is in your heart, right? The kingdom of God is in your heart, right? It's amid your midst. And like the Jewish people, they don't want to hear that, right? Like it's a much higher level promise, but they didn't want to hear that. They wanted someone just to save them physically, when what God was giving to them at that time was an even higher, a much higher level promise than before. It was about salvation of the spirit, right? And that goes beyond just the freedom of their lifetime, right? Because that's what they wanted. They just wanted freedom in their lifetime. But that's so short-sighted. Like it's short-sighted not just for them and for their life, but for their entire history, for the entire like for all of Judaism, for all of Israel, and for all of the future of mankind, right? What God wanted to give us is unfathomably bigger. And the same can be said about this time period too, right? This is something that we all know, but I think this was for me probably one of the reasons why, like reading through the Bible, there was this like topical interest. And so I hope that each person can formulate those things, and that it will encourage you and fuel you to read the Bible, and that it'll also encourage you to take action on this week in the various different ways about polishing your hearts, right? Like something covers so many different topics, and you can even like have pull out those topics and find all the scriptures in the Bible that has to do with that topic. Like whether it's about being bold and courageous, whether it's about what else did the message say, right? Whether about being pure and clean, and whether it's about the passage from Luke about the farmer who goes out to sow the seeds, right? And like how you can pull up the negative things in your heart, like in that scripture. Like we don't want to be shallow. We don't want to have like shallow soil, right? And we don't want to have like rocks and gravels and be that like path, right? That where like things may grow in the beginning, and people may be joyful in the beginning, but as the sun comes up we wither. And we don't want to be deceived by the temptation of wealth, and about the troubles and the worries of this life. And you can find like different topics about that, about worrying, about various different kinds of things, about Satan too, and the way Satan works. All right, so right, like from this one concept of polishing your heart, it's like a tree, right, that goes off from like the root, from the trunk, right? And it goes off all into all of these branches about different ways that we can do this. Anyways, like I guess, and of course we can't just do this intellectually, but a lot of times these intellectual challenges will make things exciting for us, right? And it'll make us want to take action and want to do this. But we know in Providence that the biggest thing is that we have to take action on these things. And so I hope that that will be the biggest part, but that we can do this first part too, about like kind of like taking action on this, and researching into it, because knowing to some degree can help us to outline and to plan and prepare. Anyways, that's it for Bible today, and for this entire first segment. We'll go into the break for today, and then we'll go to Rachel with 2G Talks.
life comes down to this. It is attack and defense. You must be good at both. Only then will you find success in life. What is attack? It is to do the work you should do each day. And defense is to confront problems you face each and every day. Here on the earth, no matter who you are, there is just one path leading you to life. Justly attack and defend. You can do this if you will serve and love our Lord God forever. All that you've been entrusted, render it through love and peace. Life of success, glory and victory. Your life comes down to this. It is attack and defense. You must be good at both. Only then will you find success in life. Be strong! What is attack? It is to do the work you should do each day. And defense is to confront problems you face each and every day. Here on the earth, no matter who you are, there is just one path leading you to life. Justly attack and defend. You can do this if you will serve and love our Lord God forever. All that you've been entrusted, render it through love and peace. Life of success, glory and victory. Fighting! Be strong! Fighting! Be strong! Life of success, glory and victory. Life of success, glory and victory. Life of success, glory and victory.
Rachael here for 2G Talks. This is the segment where we hope to create a narrative and conversation around second gen's experience in Providence, along with other second gen related topics, all centered only on the Lord. Today, we'll discuss the Sunday message from a second gen's point of view, my new action plan initiative, and how we can all focus and work to polish our hearts. Welcome back, everyone, to 2G Talks. Did y'all like my new intro? I was listening to some pretty interesting podcasts about just a different variety of things, about literature and history. And a lot of them started off with a short introduction of what the segment was going to be discussing, and then introduced the theme song. So I think that from now on, I kind of liked how it went. I'll probably be introducing 2G Talks in this way from now on. So I hope you like it. Today I am filming 2G Talks in a very special location. I'm filming it or recording it here at my best friend's house, Alva. So shout out to Alva. But that means if you hear any sort of funny noises or cats trying to get into the room I'm recording, that is why. We can blame her. Anyways, getting into it. So like I said in my intro, today I wanted to discuss the Sunday message, so I'll start with that. This past Sunday message, I know that Pastor Sky probably already talked about it on his Monday podcast, but the Sunday message was titled, Polish Your Heart. Now Now, there was one really important key point that I wanted to bring up that truly resonated with me, and I think probably would resonate with other second gen or even members. It was this one sentence that Sansanim said. He said that there are times we have to take action, even when it hurts us. Take action so to not be destroyed by your very own heart. And whenever I heard this sentence during the Sunday message, I could only think of Jesus at that time. You know, in the beginning too, Jesus really struggled to become the man of mission of the New Testament, the Messiah. He starved in the desert for 40 days. And when he had to bear the cross, I mean, that is the most tremendous amount of suffering a human being could stand. But I remember the scripture from John 12, verse 24, which reads, "Very truly I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds." Now, I don't know if Sansanim has explained this scripture or if Jesus was talking about him, but I imagine Jesus being like that kernel of wheat, so pure and righteous, who had to die for our sake. And I also can't imagine someone wanting to die, even Jesus. But regardless of that, he did it. He did it because he knew what would occur if he didn't. And how through his blood, history would continue on. And he did it because it was God's will. And so he took action, even though it was extremely painful. Sansanim too. At the very beginning of his mission, 20 years in the mountains, starving, praying in the freezing cold temperatures, going to the Vietnam War twice, right? Going to war twice, dealing with the injustices of his trials and imprisonment twice. I mean, these are things that normal humans could not do on their own. But we do them even though it's painful because we do them with God. Us too, I think, whether or not you're second gen, everyone has been put in a situation where you're forced to decide. Are you going to do something that you don't want for the better of everyone? Or are you just going to ignore it? And I have many different stories that I could share. Some more personal than others, but especially as a teacher, I've been forced to deal or adjust and learn how to deal with confrontation. I'm not someone who's particularly confrontational. I'm more of a pacifist. Some people may say that I'm very outspoken, which is true. But I would really rather ignore a situation and let it resolve itself. And a lot of the times in life and even with teaching, students will work things out, right? They'll always work things out amongst themselves. I don't have to get involved. It's great. But there was this one time in class, and I'll just share this story real quick, where I had a student who was blatantly disrespectful to me in front of the whole group of students, which was about 30. And the school that I work at is a really good school, so there's never really any problems behaviorally. But this was a student who had asked to go to the bathroom at the very beginning of class. I told her to wait because I would write her a pass. But in front of the whole class, she told me that no, she wasn't going to wait. She had to go now, and so she was going to leave. She didn't care what I had to say. So she got up and walked out of the class. And then she was gone for more than 2/3, 3/3 of the class. Like, she was gone for so much time. And when she came back at the very end of class, I remember praying to God and being like, what do I do with this student? I've never dealt with such a confrontational student before. Do I yell at her in front of everyone, try and show my authority or that I'm the boss? You shouldn't talk to me like that. Should I be soft with her. Like, I just had no idea what to do. And I remember being at the board, feeling the other students' eyes on the back of my head. Just, they really were so curious to see, oh, is a student being allowed to act in such a way? Can we misbehave in the same way too? So I knew that I had to do something. So even though I had no plan, I just called out to the Holy Trinity, especially the Holy Spirit, and I walked right up to that student. And usually I'm very accommodating, very encouraging and whatnot with most of my students, including her. But this time I was just very cold, very logical. I explained to her that this was not the first time that you've walked out of the classroom. This is not the first time that you've been to the bathroom and been out of the classroom for more than 30 minutes out of a 50-minute period. This is also not the first time that you have blatantly been disrespectful to me in front of other students because you didn't want to wait. And I explained to her, I was going to write you a pass. I just needed to take attendance, give instructions first, would have taken me 3 minutes, and you could have gone. But now, because you were completely rude, we have an issue. And the whole time, she was just cold, poker face, wasn't even looking at me. I don't even know if she was listening to me. And so I knelt down to her, because I didn't want to look down on her, so I was kneeling down, talking to her like this. And I told her, obviously, this conversation isn't really working. I'll be sure to contact your mother and contact the AP, which is assistant principal, because obviously communication isn't happening here. I'll be sure that they can help us with any sort of translation or communication needs that we may need in the future, just in case. FYI. And I remember she was so upset after I talked with her like that, because I wasn't super mad. I didn't start yelling at her, how dare you? Nope, just very, very matter of fact. And all of my students around me were like, whoa, that was crazy. And she went, and this student of mine, she got on my no-go list, which means she wasn't allowed to go to the bathroom. But after a couple of days, she didn't ask, she didn't really talk to me. And then eventually one day, Miss, I really, really have to go. And I said, well, you're on my no-go list. I've already talked to your mother about it. She's on board. The AP's note, you're not allowed. She said, well, you don't understand. So we were going back and forth. And eventually I told her, I really respect you. And I don't think she was expecting that. And I told her, I really respect you. I see how you work in class. When I ask you to put your phone away, you put it away usually. You get your work done, even if it's not in class and at home. But it's how you speak to me that's not okay. So we had this really deep conversation about how she did not understand her tone was being perceived a certain way. She thought she was just speaking up for herself. But I was finally able to tell her, no, it wasn't that. It was, I don't like your tone. And now I understand your tone isn't you being rude. It's just you speaking up for yourself. But can we do XYZ so that we can be on the same page and no one gets upset? And so even though it was difficult at first and uncomfortable, because, I have this student every day for almost an hour and she's always there bothering me, we worked through it. And recently, too, I've had my fair share of harmony talks. And those are all things that I really didn't want to do. I didn't want to have to talk to that student. I didn't always want to have the harmony talks together because they're painful, right? They're uncomfortable. They're anxiety-inducing. But I did them because I knew I had to. That I knew that's what I should do. Of course, these are all minuscule things in comparison to what Jesus and Sansanim went and are going through currently. But like I said, this sentence that Sansanim said, you have to take action even when you know it's painful, really struck me because, yeah, my story is super small and not that big of a deal. But someone like Sansanim who's going through so much difficulty right now is writing that sentence and telling us, take action even if it's hard. That's because he's taking action even though it's so painful for him. And yeah, sometimes it seems not only painful, but impossible. But I truly do believe that as long as we do it together with God and we're harmonious with one another, we can do anything. That's how Sansanim does it. it's because he's not doing it on his own. It's not just him. He's truly doing things together with God. And so from that message, doing things and taking action, even if it's really difficult and painful, I've started a new initiative for myself. And it actually came because the inspiration I received from last week's Sunday message, which was titled Deliver the Word with Wise Planning, Pray, and Take Action. So during this message, actually about halfway through the Sunday message, I was struck by inspiration. And so I quickly started writing in my notes. And I was reaffirmed with my inspiration and to continue following this inspiration through the Wednesday message on November 20th, which was titled, It is First, Polish Your Heart and Mind. And so through this last Sunday message, last Wednesday, and even today's Sunday message, that I was able to come with a full action plan. Really, I'm calling it my Advent calendar that I wanted to share with you guys. It's so funny, though, because Sensitive is always right. I mean, your thoughts really do determine your heart and your actions. I made this action plan because I just want to really prepare and make myself for the future. But the only reason that I'm doing that is because I know in my future I'm not going to be working anymore. Before I decided to quit teaching, the simple idea of just having to work next year or continuously for the next couple of years, it killed me. Don't want to be dramatic, but I am. And sometimes, because I was so exhausted, it would be so difficult for me to do simple things, like praying, or waking up on time for the pre-dawn, reading my Bible. And I want to say that, while I'm working, I still do, and usually did wake up for the pre-dawn, read my Bible, and pray. When I did it, I felt like it wasn't 100%, right? Maybe I was doing it out of formality, or I was lacking in preparation or effort to the Holy Trinity. But once, within my own personal life and family, we decided that I wasn't going to be working next year. Of course, I do plan, again, to work part-time, but focus more so on full-time ministry and work in Providence. Just that sudden change in my heart, change in my thoughts. Now, even though I'm still working as a teacher, even though I work long hours, I don't sleep a lot, and I'm still struggling to balance work and Providence life, I now have so much more strength and determination. I feel like I can pray better. I feel like I can read my Bible more. I wake up for pre-dawn just because, again, like I said, that simple change in my thoughts. And because my thoughts change, my heart changed. And so the actions of my body also changed. So anyway, Sensitive's always right. And because of my newfound strength from the Lord, like I said, I've created an action plan, which I'm calling it my Action Advent Calendar. And I'm doing it because before I start working full-time Providence, I really want to ensure that I have some concrete, basic level of faith habits fully instilled within me and fully perfected. I know some said that habits are made within, I think you said 60 or 90 days. So I've concocted a 3-phase plan to make myself perfectly in these ways so that I can be used perfectly by the Holy Trinity. And officially, I'm calling it my Perfect Me plan. So the PMP is this new plan. Like I said, it's going to include 3 phases. The first phase I have pretty detailed out. The last 2, not so much. So my first phase is focused on sleep schedule. Second phase is going to be exercise. And third phase is lecture training. Like I said, I haven't really fully planned out phase 2 and 3, but I do have phase 1 planned out really well. So I'll share. Essentially, phase 1 is going to be a total of 90 days. So I started this project, action plan on November 17th, 2024. And I'm going to do this until February 15th, 2025. Which, surprisingly enough, is 3 days before Resurrection Day. The main purpose that I have for phase 1 is to ensure that my sleep schedule allows and helps me to balance Providence life and my work life. Ideally, I'm really trying to make my sleep schedule so that it can accommodate and fit pre-dawn, because that's the most important thing. Satsum has told us so many times, wake the pre-dawn, wake the pre-dawn, wake the pre-dawn. So I have a pre-dawn game plan within this phase 1. I have a couple requirements. I think every single person's different, but for myself, I need 6 to 7 hours of sleep. Some days I don't need that much. I can do 1 or 2 days with only 4, but in general, I've noticed that I work really well on 6 to 7 hours of sleep. Otherwise, I get kind of nauseous. I don't know if you guys get nauseous when you're really tired or maybe headaches, but that's what happens to me. I'm somebody who, in phase 2, will be staying awake after pre-dawn. But for right now, I still do need to sleep right after pre-dawn just to get that nap in before I go to work. Which means that my main prayer, needs to be done before the pre-dawn service. And Sunsun was always saying that we need to set times for ourselves to pray. And I don't always like doing that because, I like to be fluid. But I want to set a condition of praying at least 30 minutes prior to pre-dawn and then start being consistent with that and then pushing that to more and more times. I remember in college, some days I would pray 20 minutes. Other days it'd be an hour and a half. So I'm going to try and work out that prayer muscle and really make it strong. So because I'm trying to set the pre-dawn, Sunsun said it's not just the pre-dawn time that you have to look at what's happening while you're not waking up, but you have to look at what's happening before. So what's your sleep schedule like? So because of that, I need 6-7 hours of sleep. That means my bedtime has to be around 9 p.m. Because in Houston Eagle Church, I don't know if your church is like this, feel free to comment, but our church, we start pre-dawn at 4:20 a.m. So 4:20 in the morning, we have our pre-dawn. So for me, that means if I want to pray, I have to be praying by 3:50 to 4:20, which means I have to wake up around 3:45 a.m. And if I want that 6 to 7 hours of sleep, I have to go to bed by 9. And already, you can't see it here, but I have it out. You can see my whole list of okay, which means I have to shower by this time, which means I have to eat dinner by this time, which means I need to read my Bible. It's all here. So it's very extensive. But yeah, this is my overall schedule that I'm trying to push and have myself do for the next 90 days for my phase 1 of my PMP, Perfect Me plan. Of course, though, I am someone who needs to be bribed. I know my physical body, Rachael, I love her so much, and she is definitely motivated by bribes, specifically food. She loves food. If there's no reward or punishment, my body, Rachael, is not going to do it. She's not going to do it. So, knowing that, I decided that for the first 20 days that I want to be consistent in waking up for the pre-dawn. So every day I need to wake up for the pre-dawn, and every day my goal is to pray fully alert for 30 minutes. And I want to do that consistently for 20 days. So get that 20-day hit combo type of thing. And if I get that, then I can start with daily rewards. So that means getting myself a free drink after work, a donut, buying ice cream, like small little things that I can do to reward myself for my efforts. Because I think that's important. I don't think we should just expect ourselves to do really well all of a sudden. You have to take little steps. And then, of course, after a little while, I plan on moving my rewards to weekly. And to hit that 90 days, that means I have to have a combination of 14 consecutive weeks of me doing things perfectly. I know it's really a big plan, but Sunsum said, you're rewarded according to how much you take action. And I really want to take action in a big way. I have everything planned down to the minute, even the hour that I should be getting for bed, eating, preparing for my 2G scripts even. I do all this because, like I said, I really just I want to do big things so that I can keep my promise to God, so that I can make myself for Him. I'm doing this too because I realize that my life, it's not really for me. It's for God. I want to give Him my heart and life because I love Him. And I don't simply want to say that with just words alone. Where my spirit goes, where my thoughts go, my body has to follow too. So I'm going to work really hard to ensure that I can polish my heart, mind, thoughts, and body. And so that when I look at myself in the mirror, I can ask, do you like who you are now? Are you a better version of who you are or were? And I can say yes. Champions are made through strife, everyone, right? So we need to fight and win. If you felt inspired from listening to my PMP, my Perfect Me plan, feel free to reach out. I'd love to share with you a copy of my Google Doc that I made to help me keep track of, when I go to bed, when I wake up for pre-dawn, what treats I got. So again, if you're interested, feel free to reach out through the 2G Talks email so I can get that to you. I truly hope that we can all polish our hearts to not only increase our own happiness, because making yourself is such a fun and awesome thing to do, but also to make the Holy Trinity happy, and to ease Sensitim's heart too, to ensure that we can do all that we can for Sensitim's sake and for this complete Testament history. So with that, if you haven't already, please feel free to comment and leave a like, or shoot me an email at 2gtalks@gmail.com. I hope you'll have a great rest of your Tuesday together with the Lord.